Hey everybody, we're Trent and Maggie Whittington, and we are real estate agents in the Central Indiana area. We are with At Properties, and we thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so today what we mostly want to talk about is just the recent changes to the laws in the real estate industry. Whether you're another agent or if you're a client of ours or someone who doesn't know us at all, maybe you've heard a lot about this in the headlines, maybe all of this is brand new information to you. But we just wanted to talk about what has changed, what hasn't changed, and what that means for buyers, sellers, and agents.
If you've seen headlines, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, everybody is putting some attention grabbers out there as far as changes within the agency relationship between buyers and real estate agents. And that is true. There are definitely changes coming. Some of the headlines are
a little misleading.
Meant to grab your attention. Obviously, they're just doing their job there. But so we just want to tell you
fact.
Tell you what the truth is. And so far, what we know is for sure, as of July 1st, Governor Eric Holcomb has said that a realtor working with a buyer in Indiana has to have what is called a buyer agency agreement signed in order to show any homes.
Yes, before touring any homes. Yeah. And also, as of July of 2024, the field in the MLS, which is the multiple listing service where agents will advertise their listings, we can no longer advertise that sellers are going to be paying a buyer agent commission. That field is going away. So sellers can still offer a buyer agent commission, but it can't be advertised on the MLS. So how is that going to be communicated to buyers and their agents? TBD. I don't know that we have an answer for that yet.
And when we say buyer agency agreement, think of almost like a listing contract instead of with a seller, with a buyer, right? So historically speaking, there has been contracts between sellers and listing agents, but there has not been the same with buyers and buyers agents. And so as of July, that will change, and any consumer working with any agent will have essentially a contract that addresses that agency relationship. Yeah,
what the agent's responsibility is to the buyer, how they protect their information, how they represent them, and then how the buyer is going to then pay their agent. I think the reason behind all of these changes is to increase transparency between the consumer and the agent about what the agent's compensation actually is. And just to really clarify that buyers and sellers should each be responsible for paying their own agent. It's kind of as simple as that.
And, to make it transparent, up until this point, potentially a buyer was not aware of what they were paying their agent, I suppose. Do they feel some type of way about maybe they've overpaid, or, that's the crux of this whole conversation. Although it's funny, in my recent conversations with buyers about the changes, they were like, basically, we like the way it was, so.
Well, I think anytime there's a change, people can tend to feel alarmed and panicked. And I think agents, especially right now, we know that there's been a change. It almost feels as if there's been a bomb dropped, but then not a ton of clarity as to some of the repercussions of that. And so I think in order to understand what's changed, we should really go back and think about what has always been true.
Can I say something real quick? I think, full disclosure, we're telling you as of April 18th what we know, and there's a lot of things that we don't know, right? We don't know strategically how this is going to play out between, like when somebody comes to make an offer or whatever, getting into the weeds, we don't know how it's all going to shake out. We don't know what percentage of sellers are going to pay buyers agents in the future. We don't know any of that. What we do know is factually what's changing from a legal standpoint. And so today we're just essentially talking about what we know has changed. And the rest is just going to be figuring it out as the market perceives it, I guess.
So what's always been true is sellers have never been forced to pay a buyer's agent commission. They're still not forced to pay a buyer's agent commission. It's always been optional. It's always been encouraged, and it still is encouraged. Buyers have never been forced to work with a buyer's agent. Both buyer and seller have always had the option of representing themselves or going it alone, I suppose you would say. So all of those things have always been true. They are still true today.
Yep. So, and one of the things we want to talk about is just to know where we're going. We sort of need to look at where we've been as far as what is the history of agency relationships. And when we say agency relationship, we mean between consumer and agent, not like at properties or, you know, some of these other agencies. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the dynamic between the consumer and the realtor, right? And so where it started was in the 60s. Well, before the 60s, there was no MLS, there was no cooperation between different brokerages. And so what you would literally have is like
I think it was books, right?
It was books of listings, and you would literally walk in to that brokerage and say, I want to buy a house. And they would say, here's the 12 houses. Yeah, flip through this book and find one of the 12 that you want to buy. And so there was no cooperation between, say, At Properties and FC Tucker back then. And in the 60s, they created the MLS, the multiple listing service, which basically allowed cooperation between brokerages.
Which was great. It was a win for buyers because then they didn't only get an option from the 12 listings in that book, they got to see all of the listings. And then from a seller, you got your home displayed for many, many, many buyers to take their pick from. Not only did the MLS allow brokerages to cooperate with each other in advertising their listings, it also allowed brokerages to share the commission that was paid by sellers with a cooperating agent. Basically, that allowed agents who were not representing the seller to help sell that property. So these agents were known as sub-agents because they were technically subcontracted by the listing agent to help sell that property. And so what that meant, which is kind of weird, is that the sub-agents legally represented the seller and owed the seller a fiduciary duty, even though they likely had never even met the seller. So the agent showing a buyer properties had a legal obligation to protect that seller and their best interests and represent their best interests rather than the buyer's best interests. So there was no one representing the buyer's best interests.
So this would be like going to court and your attorney that's protecting you is actually working for the prosecutor.
They're actually not protecting you. They're protecting the other party. And so naturally that led to a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration, I would imagine, for buyers. But that happened for several decades. In 1983, there was an FTC study that revealed that 72% of buyers mistakenly believed that the agent showing them homes represented them in their best interests, and they disclosed confidential information to them, and that was actually not the case.
So then fast forward to the 90s, which that's a stunning stat in and of itself. That
was after you were born.
Well, but in the 80s, they did a study that said, we as buyers feel like we're getting ripped off. And then in the early 90s, it took them 10 years to say,
change.
We should have buyer's agents. You know, so it's just kind of amazing how slow that transition is. But
then how much that changes, like that's just in your lifetime of what all has, things were drastically different when you were born versus how they are now.
So we think of buyer agency as like, oh, well, that's been around since the beginning of time, right? Like the National Association of Realtors was started in 1908. So when you think about this stuff, you think like it's been going on this way the whole time. Well, no, buyer agency as we know it today started in the early 1990s. So fast forward to the 90s, now buyer's agents are working with their agent as a fiduciary or as somebody that has to legally act in their best interest.
For the very first time. And that was all with the goal of eliminating confusion and eliminating ultimately buyers being taken advantage of. So with some of these changes in the laws that make it what seems to be a little bit harder to pay a buyer's agent, or potentially harder for buyers to have the opportunity to be represented by a buyer's agent, there could be maybe an assumption of, what does a buyer's agent even do? Are they necessary? Are they important? In 2024, what does a buyer's agent do?
Yeah, so I think the role of a real estate agent today, really the role of a good, valuable real estate agent has always been and will always be to give consumers confidence in the decisions that they're making, and also mitigate the risks of the transaction, right? So these are big purchases, oftentimes, you know, the biggest transaction that somebody will ever do. And so that has always been the value, and it will always be that way. Technology has changed things. So I think it used to be, you would look at an agent and think they find the house, right? That's all they really do, is they're finding the house or showing the home. Or writing the contract, right? Or filling out the holes in the contract. In the blanks. This is something we get. Can you just do the paperwork, right? And there is so much more to the protection of a consumer from an agent than just filling out blanks. Anybody can do that, right?
Yeah.
So
even just market knowledge, I think it's something that we don't say a lot because we don't want to sound arrogant, but I mean, we've sold over $100 million worth of real estate in our careers, and we're selling over $20 million every year. And so we're doing this every day. We're doing this a lot, versus a buyer only does this a small handful of times in their lifetime. Yeah. And so if they're seeking, if they're going into a transaction with just their own experience or their own knowledge, or utilizing maybe a parent or a grandparent's knowledge who bought a home 20 years ago, not that isn't valuable or helpful, because it is, but things, as we've seen in your lifetime, things are drastically different.
Or are they buying a home, or have they bought a home in Illinois and they're moving to Indiana, even in the same 5 years, right? Things are totally different. So real estate's hyper local.
Yes. Yeah. And if you do it once or 5 times in your lifetime versus we're doing this every single day, there's just a level of insight that comes along with that that you can't get unless you're working with a real estate agent. Right.
And so working with a great buyer's agent in 2024, you should have confidence in the value of the home, in the integrity of the home. So is it going to need $40,000 of repairs immediately? And as part of that discovery of the integrity of the home, negotiating the inspections appropriately.
Knowing which inspections to even get and who to contact for those
do you
inspections.
need a sewer scope, a septic, probing, all these things that I never thought I would know about, but I know a lot about sewer scopes and foundations and all this stuff nowadays. Is the land that you're building on, can you do what you want to do on that piece of property?
Yeah,
or
and
is
do you
there
know who to call to find out?
Probably not, right? Because you're busy doing the rest of your life, whatever your job is.
Well, and the reason we know who to call is because this is our entire job. We're supposed to have those connections, we're supposed to know those people, and they're supposed to be good.
So whether we're talking about buyer's agent or listing agent today, the role, it's an advisory role, right? This is not even limited to a standard real estate deal is 30 to 45 days for listing to closing, whatever. That is a very short blip on what is the actual timeline of an agency relationship between a client and an agent nowadays, right? This is somebody that should be in, I like to refer to it as a cabinet, right? So if you think about the president and in his cabinet or his trusted advisors, right? We are one of them. Why are you laughing at me?
I just think about when we were teenagers, my brother always used to say he wanted to run for president, and I would ask him if I could be a part of his cabinet, and he was like, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know why either of us thought we were qualified to run for president or be in his cabinet, but it felt important.
I think today he would allow you.
I think he would too.
Yeah. So an agent is a part, like you should have a good CPA. You should have a good real estate agent. You should have a financial advisor. You should probably have an attorney somewhere that you can call that you have a relationship with for just estate planning, whatever, right? And so, and a realtor should work with those people well and know what those conversations are. I've had clients recently come into Money and contact me on who should do their estate planning, right? And a realtor that's worth their salt in 2024 should be able to answer those questions.
Yeah, I think another thing that we always emphasize throughout our client relationships is, like you said, it doesn't end after the 30 to 45 day transaction period. Even just earlier this week, I had a client reach out. They bought a home last year. They were first-time home buyers, and they found out that they have mice in their attic. And they were given like a $12,000 quote or more, maybe. It was wild, of solving that problem. And they're smart. They felt like there was something not right about that. But I was immediately, no, let me send you a couple other contacts and let's get a few quotes to see what's a reasonable price to take care of that issue. Is that even a full issue or is that even a real issue that this company has made you think that it is? And I think that's valuable. That's what an agent should do, is have those connections of who to call, who can be a trusted vendor versus who is someone who's just trying to take your money.
And so that circumstance alone could be the difference of thousands of dollars of savings. In which case, had they had to pay you directly when they purchased that home, would be half to all of what your fee would have been in that transaction, right? So, and the point is that you're the resource that they called to help solve the problem. Right?
And I hope our clients feel like they can always come back to us after closing, and that they don't feel like they're bothering us, because that's what we're here to do, is even after you've closed on your home, we're here to be that resource for you.
So what does it mean for buyers in, let's say, August of 2024?
Well, I think it's important to think that paying your buyer's agent is an investment. It's not a fee. It's an investment into you, honestly, into your future and the resources that they can provide you. Something I like to say, I don't really say this to people, I say it to myself, but that if a transaction is smooth with a buyer, or if we sell a home quickly for a seller, they're not paying us necessarily for the hours we did or did not spend on their individual transaction, but they're paying for, this is my 9th year in the business. This is, I don't even know how many for you.
Like 100, 14.
They're paying for the years that it took us to learn how to do that, and the headaches that they didn't come into because we helped prevent that. Even if a transaction's bumpy and it's not just a picture perfect thing, it would have been much worse if we weren't there to help point out some of these things.
Or if it was easy, was it easy because you're good at your job? Or was it easy because maybe it was a newer home and there weren't as many, maybe everything was updated. Maybe the roof was newer and the HVAC was newer. It's on a slab, so there's no foundation issues. So it was like, Maggie really didn't even help us negotiate inspection repairs because there really wasn't anything wrong. Well, you're probably the one that guided them to find a newer home because they probably weren't a good fit for an older home. Right? So that in and of itself, a lot of value there. Right? So I guess tactically, what does it mean for a buyer in 2024?
I think something that we've talked about is any party, you pay your own accountant, you pay your own attorney, and now with the recent changes, the intent behind it is you pay your own real estate agent. And so it kind of makes sense that you just pay your own representation. That's kind of the point of this. There are still ways that the buyer agent commission or compensation can be negotiated for the seller to pay. How all of that is going to look, we don't have all the answers for that yet, but we do know it is absolutely still possible to negotiate with the seller and the listing agent to pay some or all of the buyer agent compensation. But I do think it's important for buyers to be prepared to either contribute to or pay that fee or that investment.
And that's what the buyer agency agreement is going to say.
Yeah, it's going to make it very clear.
Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is my fee. By signing this, we're entering into a relationship where you understand that this is ultimately what I'm going to be paid for these services.
Yeah.
Now, could it come from the seller? Yes, potentially. This form actually allows us to put it into the purchase agreement and make it a term of the purchase where it previously wasn't. But at the end of the day, if we're going to work together, this is my fee. And if it has to come from the buyer, then that's where it is.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And as of now, it is not looking like that buyers can wrap that fee into their mortgage as an add-on item of, hey, lender, I want to go ahead and finance. I'm going to be paying my buyer agent commission. Go ahead and finance that into my loan, tack that onto my purchase price. It is not looking like that's going to be possible.
Right.
I feel like each week or every couple weeks, there's new guidelines or new information from these lending institutions. I mean, what is the technical term for like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac?
They are a government something entity. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are, they're essentially who sets the rules in mortgage law because they're the secondary buyers of, or they're the secondary market. They're setting the rules for how things can be underwritten. And so what they're saying at this point in time is that a buyer's agent commission cannot be included. It cannot be essentially added on top of the purchase price.
Correct.
And wrapped into the loan.
Right.
Okay. Which is sort of how, the buyers that I'm talking to now, they're like, well, these changes kind of stink because up until now it was sort of all packaged together, right? So that was nice for
and now
the
it's potentially an additional portion of cash to be paid at closing by one party or another.
Yeah. Now what they're also saying, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, is that they're not going to consider the seller paying the buyer's agent commission as a seller concession. So what Fannie and Freddie stipulate is that,
and FHA
and HUD, is that a seller can only contribute X amount of percent to a buyer for closing costs, whatever, right? And those percentages are often dictated by the type of loan and how much you're putting down, et cetera. So what they're saying is, if we as buyer's agents represent a buyer and we ask for our commission to be paid by the seller, like it is today,
yes.
right? That commission would not be counted against the seller concessions that they can also ask for.
Yeah.
In other words,
so
they could ask for the buyer's agent commission to be paid, and they could still ask for their closing costs to be paid.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So,
so I think ultimately what this means for buyers is they need to be selective with who they're working with. I think sometimes real estate agents can get a bad rap, and some of that's justified.
Yeah.
But I think there are good agents out there. We obviously feel as if we're good agents.
Yeah, we're biased.
But I think it's very important for a buyer or a seller. I would encourage anyone to, before you hire an accountant, do your research. Before you hire an attorney, do your research. Before you hire a real estate agent, do your research.
Sure.
And make sure it's somebody who is qualified to help you, who you feel like you connect with, and who's going to be a part of your team that's ultimately working towards your goals, your best interests, moving forward throughout your transaction. And that's going to look different for each party.
Yeah.
But I think that's really important.
Yeah. My fear is what it means for buyers in 2024 moving on is that they will say that they don't need buyer representation. And I think if we look at history, we've obviously decided that the buyer needs an advocate, right? They need somebody that's representing them. And what I think a lot of people will say is, I'm just going to do this myself.
Yeah.
And Maggie and I talk a lot about like our time, and when you say yes to do something, you're also saying no to something else. Or when you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. My fear is that buyers in 2024 will say no to buyer agent representation, and they're saying yes to a lot of risk that they have no idea. They're saying yes to a lot of uncertainty in outcomes because they think they know and they don't.
And it's all to save on to some people a small fee, to some people a large fee in the here and now.
Right.
But what is that doing?
Right.
Not only to you in the here and now.
What are you opened up to?
Yeah. I think a good kind of example of this is before we met and before I came into your life and blessed you.
Before my advisor Maggie was brought into my life.
You did your own taxes.
You
also were not incorporated. You didn't have a corporate structure.
Yeah.
And so you were not properly set up to be doing that. Did something catastrophic and horrible happen? No. You did your taxes. You didn't go to jail.
Did I fill out the blanks?
You filled out the blanks.
I did fill out the blanks.
Did you go to jail? No.
Right.
Did you do something wrong? Not really.
No.
Did your taxes get paid every year? Yes.
Yeah.
Did
I cost myself tens of thousands of dollars more? Yes, I did.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
because you're not a CPA.
I'm not a CPA. Yeah.
Do you know enough? You're an intelligent human being.
I am.
Do you know enough to be dangerous, to help yourself in the here and now? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you could do it.
Right.
Could a buyer represent themselves in a purchase? Yeah, they could. Are they going to do a good job? Probably not. Right. Did you do a good job not selling your house? Did you do a good job doing your own taxes?
Paying the IRS too much?
Yeah.
I did a great
you
job.
did not.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So actually this year we almost paid a lot of taxes, but it was the conversation, we paid a lot. We almost paid too much.
More than we needed to.
Exactly, because our financial advisor and our CPA
worked
had
together.
A great conversation,
Yeah.
and they figured it out, you know, because they knew what they were doing. Right?
Yeah, and the fees that we pay our CPA and our financial advisor are worth their weight in gold, because that not only saved us in the here and now, but think about over our lifetime what that's helping us with, and the strategy that they're able to provide to us. And really, as we've said a million times, a real estate agent, a real estate advisor should be the same way.
Yeah. What does it mean for sellers in 2024?
Well, kind of what we've already said. You don't have to pay a buyer agent commission. You've never had to pay a buyer agent commission. You've never had to pay. We think you should.
Yeah.
Don't interview
I'm drilling
me.
you.
That's what.
Yeah.
I think that sellers should view a buyer agent commission as a marketing expense to sell their home.
Yeah.
A good example of that would be, do you want one agent motivated to sell your home, or do you want thousands of agents motivated to sell your home? And if you want one agent to be motivated to sell your home, you pay your listing agent and you don't offer a BAC.
Yeah.
If you want other agents to be motivated to reach out to their network of people, reach out to their buyers, to bring them in to view your home, you're going to offer a buyer agent commission because you want them to understand that they can be compensated for their time spent trying to help sell your home.
Yeah. You're also, by not offering a buyer agent commission, you are effectively slashing your buyer pool in, I don't know, a third probably.
Yeah.
Because
there will be buyers that cannot.
They will have the down payment, they will have the closing costs associated with, say, a $500,000 house.
And that will be all that they have.
And that'll be it. Yeah. They won't have the additional
3%.
Yeah, sure, whatever. And so now they become a 400 buyer, right? Well, if you're a owner of a $500,000 house and your pool goes from 1,000 buyers to, 330, then the value of your home just became less than 500,000. So it's like you're effectively chopping them down.
Well, kind of what we always say is the larger your pool of buyers, the more money you get, the better terms you get, the better offers you get, the more money you get.
Yeah. More buyers equals
more money.
More money, better terms. Yeah. You can.
Which is the argument for sellers not listing for sale by owner, for listing with a real estate agent, because the more visibility that you can bring to your home, the more buyers, the more offers, the more money.
My favorite headline that I've read in regards to this is that home prices are going to come down because of, they say the 6% commission is dead. and therefore home prices are definitely going to come down because of this. I immediately laughed and scoffed because I know if I was to ask you what is the subset of people in selling their home that typically overprice their home the most?
For sale by owners.
For sale by owners.
Yeah.
People that are paying zero commission to either party, they're the ones that typically ask the most money because they're not really going off of any data. They're just going to say,
whatever they feel that
I think it's worth $1 million because, that's what I want, right?
Yeah.
And so for the headlines to say that these changes are going to reduce the prices, I think is just a straight, it's at least a gross assumption that may be proven. I would be shocked, but what most people look at is recent sales, right? And they're going to say,
no
I want
seller
that.
is going to say, oh, well, that house that sold 6 months ago is just like my house. It's a great comp for my house, but go ahead and price mine
back it out
3 to 6% less
I want
because
less.
I'm not going to be paying commission.
Right,
That will never happen. That will never happen.
Have you met a human?
I wouldn't do that.
No, I wouldn't
If we
either.
were selling our home, I would never say, oh, well, our neighbor sold for X. We're going to sell for 6% less.
We'd say, no, we know it would appraise for blank, so we want that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So there's probably, I would assume, a large portion of the people who are listening to this are agents because that's who cares the most about this stuff right now.
Yeah.
That's who has been the most aware of the changes, what is happening, what isn't happening.
Yeah, we think that like consumers are freaking out about this, and that
most consumers probably don't know.
That we talk to are like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Because right now it doesn't really apply to them.
Right.
Once the changes come into effect, absolutely, it will apply to them. So it is important. But right now, I think it's primarily agents that are creating the buzz about it. So speaking to agents here for a second, I think it's extremely important. The agents, we should have always been focused on this, but I don't think we're necessarily taught to be this way, that we need to be focused on actually providing great value and showing the value that we provide.
Yeah, I think as a body, real estate agents have been almost lumped in with used car salesmen for a while because there's all this money being paid and, well, they're not really doing that much. Part of that is because we're not doing a good job explaining to our clients of what we actually do. And some of that probably, it does feel awkward. I think who wants to tell somebody
how
exactly,
amazing you are?
I mean, that feels like super arrogant,
gross.
right?
Yeah.
But I think that overall, as a body, we haven't done a great job of, number one, showing our value, or number two, adding value. I think there's a lot of agents that haven't added massive value to consumers. And so it is being scrutinized, the commission. And fair play to the consumer. I think ultimately what's going to happen is it's going to be better for the consumer at the end of the day. Let's say I was a new agent. Right?
That doesn't have an established career, that's
or
maybe feeling nervous.
Say I'm an established agent that is not being led very well with where I'm at today. I would be looking at what brokerages add value to agents and help agents show value to their clients the best. What brokerages are giving you the tools that allow you to learn and sharpen your skills and then show them to to the consumer. One of the things that we're super proud about with At Properties is that if you look at median agent production over the last 3 years and you average that out, right? The last 3 years, which have been up and down years, right? Things you had 21, 22, 23. Crazy, I mean, a lot of changes, right? If you look at those, At Properties in our market is the leader of that median income or median production, meaning if you took our first agent that maybe sold nothing and you take our highest producer and you line them all out and you pick the one in the middle for 3 years, that average is the highest average in the city. And that means that our agents are selling and they're helping each other sell and learn and grow. And the brokerage as a platform is helping them do that.
Yeah.
You know,
I think another thing we're proud of with That Properties is, this is just one example, ever since the headlines have started coming out and the laws, it came out that these laws were going to be coming into effect every Wednesday, there's been a call focused on talking about this.
Yeah.
And it's not through the lens of an agent thinking, oh no, how am I going to get paid? Which is a natural fear, or, I mean, we do this for a living. We don't do this for fun.
Right.
You know, this is how we support our family. This is how we pay our bills. So
Yeah.
obviously we have to be concerned with how we're going to get paid. But I think our leadership has done a really good job of not looking at it from that lens of the me, what does this mean for me?
Yeah.
But we're looking at it from the lens of, how does this change our industry? How
Yeah.
does this help the consumer? What
Yeah.
can we do
Yeah.
to be an advocate and a proponent of that?
Right.
And I think that's important.
Yeah,
that-
yeah. Our brokerage is taking the stance of, this is ultimately a good thing for the consumer, because there's going to be more transparency. There's going to be probably more selection, or selecting the right agent is going to become more of a part of the process,
Which will push agents to be better, which is a good thing.
which will push some agents out of the market,
Which is a
which
good
is
thing.
a good thing.
Yeah.
And so our brokerage is taking the stance of, like, this is ultimately a good thing for the consumer,
Yeah.
instead of, you know,
Fear.
let's hold on to as much money as humanly
Yes.
possible.
Yeah.
And that's how we're training the agents.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a good thing
Yeah.
for everybody.
So to sum that portion of it up, we think it's really important for an agent to be doing an evaluation of, who are you surrounded by?
Yeah.
Are you the most successful person in your office or in
Yeah.
your group of agents you surround yourself with? Maybe it's time we look at a change.
Yeah.
I think it's just very important to be aware of, who have you aligned yourself with that's going to help you. I think you like to say, show your value, grow your value. I think that's really important. And my little side note, I'm not a marketing expert, but I like to think that I am. I think we should avoid using some of the buzzwords or headlines that, as we've already discovered through conversations with clients, most consumers aren't even aware that this is happening right now. And I see a lot of agents posting stuff on social media talking about, this is what we do, this is how we need to get paid, and
Yeah.
it's a little aggressive. And
tough.
I don't think that's the intent of agents. I think we're all just trying to think, buyers, you need an agent. Please don't view this as, oh, buyers agents aren't that important, you don't need that. I think that's the intent behind it, but it's coming across a little
Desperate.
a little cringy.
Yeah.
I also see a lot of posts that say, the NAR lawsuit, what you need to know. And if I'm a consumer, I'm scrolling right past that, because I don't know what NAR is. I probably don't know that there's a lawsuit, and I don't really care.
Yeah.
So I think we should do a better job of talking about things that actually matter to
Yeah.
our clients, and showing what it means for them, what is changing for them, what's not changing for them, and
Yeah.
how we can be the resource for whatever question they do or don't have.
Sure.
I think all of that to say just goes along with, avoid having a scarcity mindset. There's essentially every year there's a new challenge or there's a change in our industry. I'm sure every industry is like that. We just don't know it because
Yeah.
that's not our field.
Well, yeah, Mark on one of those calls was talking about, we had, just since, like, he's been licensed and I've been licensed, we had the financial crisis.
Of 08?
Yeah,
or-
well, I guess he and I were both like 10, 11, whatever, but we are still feeling the ramifications of the financial crisis. So you had terrible market. You had Zillow allowed, anybody who wanted to be a for sale by owner could just
Made it easier to do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
You had institutional money in 2021, 2020.
The cash buyers that were buying up everything.
Yeah, Wall Street basically trying to buy your house. Then you have, Open Door and OfferPad come in and disrupt things even more, right? And so all of that has shaken the industry up. And this is just another form of that. And ultimately what it's making agents do is become better, and hopefully making a better climate for the consumer, so.
Yeah. Well, and what's true through all of that, I mean, you didn't even mention interest rates, the volatility in rates over the last few years. But I think it's easy to freak out and have that scarcity mindset. for not just agents, but for buyers and sellers too. Buyers thinking, oh no, I'll never be able to afford a home. And maybe you can no longer afford the home you would ultimately love to be in, but can you afford something that's more entry level for whatever your budget or price point is, get into the market and then grow from there. I think what we've seen be true through all of that is people still buy and sell. People get married, people have babies, people die, people get divorced, people get different jobs, they move schools. There are a number of reasons that people buy and sell homes and choose to use an agent that don't factor into whatever the interest rate is, whatever the headline is, whatever the current buzz in the marketplace is.
Yeah. So in conclusion, the role of an agent today, July, in
Always,
perpetuity, always, is to be an advisor to the client, to be somebody that is a reliable resource in real estate, which let's face it, is a really important field, right? Is a really important piece of everybody's happiness and financial happiness, right? And so an agent needs to be a part of that team or that financial cabinet that I keep talking about. And if you're an agent and you don't feel like you're there or like you're capable of being that role, then step your game up, right? You're going to have to. And if you're a consumer and you're thinking about making a move, probably should find an agent that you feel confident can fill those shoes, right? So I feel like that's the role moving forward. I feel like we're set up well for that. I hope we are. Hopefully we're...
we think we're amazing.
We think we're great. And we love what we do. We love helping people. We really believe in the power of making good decisions with real estate. So happy to keep doing that.
So we hope that this was a helpful conversation. If you are a consumer and you're thinking about buying or selling, or you want more information, whether it's about all of this stuff that we just talked about or just the market in general, we have a lot of resources that are available for our clients. We can post the link to that here as well. So we have a guide to buying a home, a guide to selling a home, and then a guide all about new construction. So we are happy to provide those as resources for anybody who needs them.